discussed last week about the resume. We're going to review some of your resumes. Those of you that have given me consent, I'll take a look at your resume, and everybody else can learn from that experience. And then we're going to go over phone interviews today. Now, next week, we will conclude Class 9 by going over interview techniques and by covering social media, where to go to network, how to apply for jobs, because by then you'll have your resume ready to go. So before we get started, I wanted to get your opinion about something. I wanted to ask all of you a question. First of all, can you all hear me? Great. Okay, so I just got some yeses from all of you. And then I wanted to ask everyone the following question. I had an applicant from this class send me an email, and his concern was that the rate of this class, the speed of this class progresses too slowly. And you know, I've shared this with all of you that this series of sessions, you know, the Get Back to Work Now project has been in the making for now close to 10 years. We've tried all different combinations of models. You know, we used to do these sessions in 1 hour. Then we changed it up and we did them in 3 hours. I'm talking about the 6-week session in 3 hours. Then we did a 1-day class. Then we did a camp that was 5 days, 1 day after another, you know, and then none of those combinations, none of those models really worked. And then we stumbled upon this model of having a session once a week for 6 weeks by accident. And the reason we have continued this model is because it worked. It helped people get back to work, some of whom were among the long-term unemployed. And so this friend of ours, his suggestion was that we do these sessions 1 day after another. Virginia just sent me a chat that she cannot hear anything. Virginia, that may be because of your mic. But everybody else, it seems like they can hear me. So at any rate, the 1 day per week is set up this way so that you can go through a 3-hour session, then you can do the exercises and think about the program, have it settle into your mind, and then come to another session. And by the conclusion of the 6-week period, you have the material internalized. And so, of course, you want to continue applying for jobs just like you have been prior to starting the sessions, right? So you have a resume you are going to send out to employers regardless of whether you complete these sessions or not. But by the time you complete the 6th session, after 6 weeks, now you have a new strategy, a new way of applying for jobs, and that's when you can transition into using this new model. So of course I can go faster, you know, I can speed at a faster rate, but this online model, you know, when we're in a room and I can see you, I can gauge everyone's facial expressions and speed up the session or slow it down. But in these online sessions, I can't see anyone, right? So it's arbitrary as to what the speed of the session should be. So I try to slow down the instructions so that everyone can digest the information. But maybe the speed in which we're going right now is a little slower for some people than it is for others, and I want to get everybody's opinion on this. So do you all prefer that we go at a faster pace when we do these 3-hour sessions once a week, or go at a slower pace? And you know, obviously we can do it either way. So I've prepared a poll, and I'm going to open up this poll and have you take this poll here. I just launched it, and so give me your opinion as to whether you want to go slower, faster, or the same speed. Interesting. Okay, so about 70% are saying same speed, about 30% are saying faster. So I guess I can go just a little bit faster, and that would, okay, all right, very good. So we're done with the poll. I have a pretty good opinion now about where everybody stands. Thank you so much for participating in that poll, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll. And if you weren't able to take the poll, that's okay. I got a pretty good idea as to the speed I should be going at. I'm going to go just a little bit faster. And obviously today is all about answering questions, making sure that the concepts we talked about in regards to the resume, everyone understands. And then we're going to go right into the phone interview. Yeah, I just want to share couple of feedbacks. Anne writes, I like the 3-hour format. However, 3 times a week for 2 weeks would work better for me. Now, Anne, are you saying doing the 3 hours in 2 weeks, like doing one, let's say, on Monday and one on Thursday, or just having a 2-week program? So 3 hours, 2 3-hour sessions, and then you're done. So give me your clarification on that. And then Cecilia, weekly sessions gave me time to research and touch base with others, including recruiters and headhunters who are helping me. That's, yeah, I agree with you, Cecilia. So doing these weekly sessions allows people to think and research and put things together and construct things in a more effective way. And there's always the inclination for some people to want to do things faster. You know, I want to do my resume as quickly as possible and send it out. And we know the outcome of speeding things up. We know what happens when you try to get to the resume as quickly as possible and send it out. And if you've experienced not getting responses from employers, in a lot of cases that has to do with not planning things in advance, not putting enough time into your career path and in taking your time in constructing the content of your resume. And so it takes at least 6 weeks for us to successfully do this. So, okay, very good. And Anne clarified by writing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, week 1, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, week 2, and that's 6 sessions. Okay, so completing in 2 weeks. You know, I think that would not give people enough time to digest all the information about each category. You know, so we have career path, that's a category. You need about a week to do the research and do everything that pertains to that. And if you get the career path, and then 2 days later get content for the resume, and 2 days later get content for networking, it just doesn't give you enough time to process this and do a good job, good enough job to get the content of your resume put together. I think that some of this will be clarified today as I'm going through everyone's resumes. Those of you that gave me consent, you'll see the difference between, well, you'll see. So at any rate, let's get started here. So today we're going to review first what we talked about last week. So right now there's an employer somewhere looking for your skills, somewhere in your area. That employer right now is sitting on a chair behind some desk, and they wish that you were in that room with them. But they don't know where you are, and you don't know where they are, right? So the key is communication, and we will learn to communicate our skills so clearly that that employer can find us. So now how do we communicate that? Well, our resume, what we call a skill doc, is the document we will use to communicate our skills. Now, this information is communicated online, or sometimes it's communicated when you give your resume to a friend and they hand it to an employer they know, right? But so that's okay. So it looks like Amy Moran cannot hear us. And I hope that she's the only one. I think everyone else can. Yeah, Amy, try logging in and out one more time, and you should be okay. I hope that you'll be okay. So our resume is the document we use to communicate our skills. Now, the first step in order for us to create a resume that best communicates our skills is to create a base resume. Now remember we talked about a base resume, right? If I had soup and I had 3 bowls with the base, they all taste exactly the same. What changes the flavor is the ingredients that I add. So I don't want to add an ingredient before I know what ingredients it is the employer wants, right? So I create a base that appeals to everyone in that environment. So let's say if I'm looking for customer service management as a position, if I want to apply to jobs in that environment, I create a base that focuses on customer service management. Then, before I apply, I add ingredients for each one of those customer service jobs. Because although they're all customer service, let's say there's 3 hiring managers hiring for customer service management. Although there are 3 different hiring managers hiring for the same position, they may want 3 totally different ingredients, right? Okay, let me stop here for a second. It looks like some of you are having difficulty. I'm getting chats here on people who cannot hear me. So Susan Schwartz is asking when the webinar is starting. Susan, can you hear us? I'm suspecting that everybody can. I just don't want to go through this session. Okay, so Troy can hear me. I don't want to go through the session and end up talking to myself. That's never good. Susan, can you hear us? Okay, so it looks like most of you can hear me, and it may be that Susan and Amy are having difficulty with their computer. Okay, I'll continue on. Okay. So at any rate, so then the next thing is once we got the base resume together, right? So now we've created a base resume. The next thing we want to do is get our path across within 7 seconds. Now, remember we talked about this. If this is a resume and this person's applying for customer service management, 3 different hiring managers could look at 3 different areas on this resume and get 3 totally different conclusions about the same person. One person may conclude that this applicant works in a casino cage in Las Vegas and is a supervisor by looking at the top of the resume. Another hiring manager may look at the middle and determine this person is an admin clerical type applicant. And the third may look at the bottom. The third hiring manager may look at the bottom and determine this person is really in insurance. 3 different opinions about the same person applying for a customer service management job, right? So this is hiring manager 1's conclusion. This is hiring manager 2's conclusion. This is hiring manager 3's conclusion. We don't want that. We don't want 3 different hiring managers to arrive at 3 totally different conclusions. Okay, it looks like more people than just Amy cannot hear me. I apologize, everyone. I just want to make sure everyone here on the call can hear me. So it looks like Maria and Amy and Suzanne and Sandra all cannot hear me. I have everything correct here. So I have my mic open. Okay. Thank you, David. So David can hear me. I'm going to continue on. This is, well, I hope everybody's logged in and can hear me. Okay, so excellent. So Mary seems like she can hear us now. So we don't want that. We don't want 3 different hiring managers arriving at 3 totally different conclusions, right? We want these 3 hiring managers looking at our resume, arriving at the same conclusion, and that is, this is a great customer service manager, right? So now look at this resume. I got the path on the very top. 3 different hiring managers can look at this resume and arrive at the same conclusion. And the conclusion is, this is a customer service manager quality or applicant, right? Now, what's important is that whatever I put on the top of the resume as my path, the content supports that path. Right? So we talked about that. And there are 5 points that on my resume that a hiring manager looks at when they receive my resume. When they first look at my resume, and remember, this is not 1984. This is not a time when an employer is receiving 5 or 10 resumes per ad. Today, when they place an ad, they receive thousands of resumes. It's unlikely that they can read every resume, right? Time doesn't permit that. So what they do is when they receive these resumes, first a scanner scans the content and ensures those that are not relevant are scanned out. Then those that are relevant, the hiring manager goes through, looks for 5 different areas on the resume, making sure that this resume is relevant. And these are the 5 areas that they look for. The first one is the title. Now remember, the title of the resume was this area right here, right? This was the title of the resume. And the title represents that area where a hiring manager looks for to see what you did in your previous job. Now traditionally, here is where we put what an employer titled us, right? Here's where we put what a previous employer titled us. But we know that rule is no longer, that strategy is no longer relevant. Here you don't want to communicate what an ex-employer titled you. Instead, you want to put what you did. We talked about this last session, right? So that was rule number 1. Rule number 2 was track record. Now track record goes right here. That's where the dates go. By the way, if this is your first session, I would suggest you log out and you complete session 2, 3, 4 before coming to session 5, because otherwise you're really going to be lost as to what we're talking about. So these dates here are your track record. And if you don't show track record, like this applicant doesn't, so this applicant is showing 1 year here, 1 year here, that's hardly a track record, right? It may convey the opinion that this applicant is jumping around. And then furthermore, what did this applicant do from 2011? There seems to be a large gap there. So the way to remedy this we talked about is to put customer service up on top here and to combine the dates and to put 3 years. And this allows us to convey a totally different message, right? I'll put 2 years. I'm not conveying how long I worked for each company. That hardly matters. That is irrelevant to what the employer is looking to determine from my resume. What the employer is looking to determine by looking at my resume is how much customer service experience do I have? How relevant is my skills to that particular applicant, to that particular job. Okay. So the reason I paused is I'm still receiving chat on my question box of people who are unable to log in or unable to hear us. At any rate, I'm those people who are unable to hear us, we will give them a call after the session and see if we can remedy their situation. So what the employer is looking for really is how many years of experience do I have in customer service? Right? Not so much how long did I work for each employer, but how many years of experience do I have in that particular area, in this case customer service. So that's what I'm communicating. Now rule number 3 is work experience. Now remember, in work experience we talked about having 2 bullets, putting the responsibilities on top, putting the positive outcome on the bottom, and the content of the bullet should be directly harmonious to my title here. Remember that? So if the title is customer service management, the bullet should be focused on customer service management, not even customer service. Let's say I was a customer service manager. Not only do I know how to manage people, I also know how to do what a customer service agent does. So if somebody was to hire me as a customer service agent, I would know how to do that job, but I have even more skill than a customer service agent. I also know how to manage in a customer service capacity. If that was the case, I would only include my customer service management skills in these bullets and not my customer service skills. Because if I put my customer service skills, it may change the focus of this resume. I could very well have two resumes. I could have a customer service resume and I could have a customer service management resume. And I don't want to mix those two up because otherwise I could be regarded as overqualified or underqualified when I mix them up. Okay? Okay, so that's really what we talked about last week. We talked about Rule 1, 2, and 3. We also talked about 4 and 5. So once I put together my bullets for the work experience, before I send my resume out, I would integrate content from a job or a position throughout my resume. So now I have my base, and before I send my resume out, I look at the job description, I look at the content within the job description, and I integrate it throughout my resume. That's what rule number 4 is, and rule number 5 was miscellaneous. It was the bottom of the resume, where your education and so on go. Okay, so that's what we talked about last week. Okay, so what I want to do now is go through some resumes, answer some questions. If you want to give me consent, what you can do is you can email me your resume right now and say, hey, Fred, look at my resume. And I'll pull up your resume and I will be able to go over your resume. Let me give you a few moments to do that. If you want to have me look at your resume, then you can send it to me right now. I'll give you a few moments to do that, and let me take care of Shelley and Virginia, who seem to be having difficulty logging into the class. Okay. So I have Parastu's resume. Let's take a look at Parastu's resume. So here's her resume. Okay. So as we're looking at Parastu's resume right now, the problem that disables us from looking at her resume any further is that right now we don't have a path, right? So remember, the first thing we want to do is determine what the path is. Because if the path is the name, then what that's telling me is the content would be focused on the name. And obviously that, I'm being facetious, we can't do that, right? So whatever goes on the top of your resume, the content would drive or be driven by that path, which is at the top of your resume. So Parastu, what is your path? Have you determined from your top 3 priorities what your path is going to be? Okay, computer engineering, very good. So what we would put up here is computer engineering, and I would have to think that computer engineering may be branched out to different disciplines or different focuses. So, but we can, that's a start. So we put computer engineering up here, right? Actually, I can bring it maybe down here right after my name. So I put my name on the very top. And anything that I put below this, first I would put my qualification summary, right? So here's the sample. Here's a sample. I have my path, and then I have the qualification summary. And this qualification summary here, which is in the form of a paragraph, tells the person who is contacting, who's reviewing my resume, why I would make a great computer engineer. So you have some of the content here, right? So you can put experienced programmer with skills in scripting. So you can put experienced programmer with scripting skills to include. Now, whatever you put there, Parastu, it should be content that every organization hiring for computer engineers wants. So for instance, if there are 10 employers who are hiring computer engineers in your area, do they all want Java? If that's the case, you can put Java on your base resume. But if some of them want Java and some of them don't, then you can't put Java on your base resume. You can integrate it as content for only those that do want it, but you exclude it from your base resume. So your resume needs to go through that transition that we talked about last week before I can continue on, but this is kind of the general concept that we want to do, Parastu, right? So I'll give you some time to do this, and I'll be happy to review it for you next week if you like, Parastu. Let me see if there's any other resumes that was sent over to me that you'd like for me to review. If there's any more people that have given me consent to review their resumes, okay? Okay, so Mary sent us her resume. Let's take a look at her resume. Okay, here's Mary's resume. So very good. She has a path on the very top, Spanish teacher. Now, the first question that comes up for me when looking at Mary's resume is when she did her career path exercise, you know, she had soft skills, hard skills, and the master's list. Where did Spanish teacher come up in her master's list? Obviously, if she's creating a resume for it, it's among the top 3 priorities. So let's look at those 3 pieces of information. How many jobs exist in her area for Spanish teaching? What is the salary average? And then what is her viability from 1 to 10? You know, after reading job descriptions, right? So let's ask her about that. So can you tell me, Mary, how many jobs exist in your area? While you're thinking about that, or you're texting that, chatting that to me, I'm going to go online and I'm going to look at your area. So Spanish teachers. Notice we put that in quotes, right? And I'm not sure where she lives, right? So what area should we be searching this for, Mary? So I'm going to type in something. I'm just going to guess. Okay, so Mary, Los Angeles. Let's see how many Spanish teachers. There is none, right? I didn't find any jobs in there. So let's say just teacher. I'm just going to put teacher, but that doesn't tell us much because Spanish teacher is very specific, right? So let's put teacher. No jobs in Los Angeles for teacher. Oh, Los Angeles. There's no city called Los Angeles. Let me redo Spanish teacher here. Spanish teacher. Okay, so in Los Angeles, it looks like there's 5 jobs for Spanish teachers. Now, there may be more. There may be less, right? So this just gives us a gauge. There may be some websites you can go to that are focused on just teachers, and there may have more job postings. But, you know, using this gauge here, it doesn't look like there are that many jobs. Mary, have you found more jobs for Spanish teaching that led you to choose Spanish teaching as your path? While you're answering, I'm going to choose teacher. Let's see how many jobs we find there. 1,140 for just teacher, right? So let's see. But there's a lot of different types of teachers. Social studies teacher, special education teacher. So what she can do is she can search this one. She can search social studies teacher if that's something she wants to do or can do, to see how many jobs exist just for that. So I come back. But again, we're going back to step 2, which was career path exercise. There's only 3 jobs in Los Angeles for that, so maybe that's not a really good fit. How about, there was a couple of other types of teachers there. Special education teacher. Let's say she determines, you know, I can do that. I can be a special education teacher. She does a search of that. And let's see what comes up when we do that. Special education teacher. There's 40 special education teachers. See, so Mary, maybe that would be an option to think about. I'm not saying it should be, but I'm just throwing out ideas at you at what needs to happen for us to determine the path. And I don't know if we were to spend time creating a resume for Spanish teaching, whether that would be time well spent if there's only 5 jobs in our area. Okay, so Mary writes, I found a few jobs on higheredjobs.com for college teaching. Okay, so, but what about Spanish teacher? You know, before we invest time creating a resume for Spanish teaching, we want to think about, is that path one you want to go with? So Mary writes, thank you. I hadn't thought about special education. Yeah, so that's always an option, right? So I'm going to pause just for a moment. Give me an idea what we should put on the path, and then I'll continue from there. Okay, so apparently we have some of you that, no, David, we didn't lose audio. There are some people on the call that cannot hear the audio portion of this presentation. And I was trying to remedy that for one of the applicants as we're waiting for Mary to send us her path. But what we're going to do is we're going to continue on. I'm going to record this session, and I'm going to make this available to today's participants, so that just in case you couldn't hear the session, hopefully the video is going to have audio, and you can look at the session after this class is done or after this session is completed. Okay, so let's go back to Mary. So Mary, you have here Mary thought of two. Let's see. Program representative or coordinator in an academic department at a college. Helen writes, I do have another resume with that. Okay, let's see. Anne writes, try bilingual teacher. Okay, we can try that. Let's search for bilingual teacher. Let's see, bilingual. Let's see if we come up with any jobs for that. Yeah, no, nothing for that. Let's go to Cecilia. Mary might want to talk to teachers' unions or superintendent associations for details on the path. I didn't find job boards particularly helpful when trying to ascertain path and typical responsibility profiles. That's a good point, Cecilia. Mary writes, okay, so we talked about that. So what I would suggest you do, Mary, is think about what you want your path to be before investing a lot of time on developing your resume. Because as you can see, as long as we don't have a defined path, that's going to influence what your titles are going to translate to, right? And right now, everything lacks harmony. So we have Spanish teacher here. We have graduate teaching assistant here. We have teacher here. And if your path was just teacher, that would be more in line with one another. But the problem is teacher's too general. You want to focus your path more. It's almost like saying, I want to be a manager. Well, you want to be a manager of what? You want to be an operations manager, sales manager, customer service manager, product manager, project manager. You know, there's so many different focuses. You want to determine which focus you're looking for. So I will give you some time to do that, and I'll be happy to look at your resume next week, Mary. Okay. Is there anybody else that has worked on their resumes and wants me to look at their resume? Let me see. I have Cecilia. So let's take a look at Cecilia's resume. Okay, so I'm going to bring Cecilia's resume up. Let's see here. By the way, when you send me your resumes, take your information off the top of the resume, then send it to me, okay? So I wasn't even paying attention to that. Okay, so let's look at this here. Director, sustainability. So we got to look at that path and see what we find. Same thing as with Mary, right? We want to take a look at this path and see if there are jobs for that particular path. So Cecilia, on your master's list, what have you found in regards to this particular position? Yeah, I can't find any jobs for that. Okay, so I'll wait for a response. This is going to be a tough resume to work on because we don't have a defined path. And you can see, like, the path is director, then you have sustainability, but the text reads business strategist and public policy analyst. This is not a base resume on any particular focus, it's not focused enough, right? So for a base resume. So we'll wait until we get something from Cecilia in clarification in regards to that. Let me go to another resume. So we're going to pull up someone else's resume here. Okay, Cecilia writes, this is a hidden job market position. I had talked to a corporate responsibility officer association and corporate recruiters about this position. Very good. The only problem is that in regards to creating a resume for a hidden job is that then you'll have to create a specific resume for that particular position. And before we can do that, we need a base resume for an environment that we want to apply to. Otherwise, we would be spending all of our time creating resumes for jobs we don't even know we would be a candidate for. You know, that process I found doesn't work, to create a resume for every single job you apply to. So what we do is we think about this particular position you are saying is a hidden job market, and look at what is its classification, what is its category. Like, is it a business strategy position? Is it a public policy analyst position? Is it a business analyst position? You know, and if you say yes, it's a business analyst position, I can look to see how many business analyst jobs exist. So that would be my first step. I look for business analyst jobs. Let's do that. I'm assuming that the category may be business analyst, right? So there's 472 jobs for business analysts. What I do then, Cecilia, is create a business analyst resume, right? So I create a business analyst resume. So this would read business analyst. Then I create a base for this resume. Now, once I'm ready to apply for a position that's hidden, the one you refer to, then I would take my business analyst resume and I would tailor it to that job. But I have a base first. If I don't create a base first, I will be all over the place. I'm not going to have a focus point, Cecilia. Okay, so Cecilia writes, it's typically a C-level or just below C-level position and filled via headhunters. Business analyst is part of what I've done in the past and a lower level position. Great. So you would create, let's say, a business analyst, which is a lower level position, something you can apply to and can do as long as it fits those three different parameters we talked about. There are enough jobs. It looks like there are. It pays your minimum salary requirements. If it does, then you can have a business analyst resume that you're sending out. And then it's your viability. Obviously, your viability would be a 10. So this is a good place to go to if it pays your salary range. Let's see. Let me respond to Joseph Bruner. It looks like he's having difficulty and he's chatting with me here. And I'm getting a lot of chats from him, so let me take care of him. Okay, so going back to Cecilia. So Cecilia, if you're looking to apply for this other position that is a C-level and is higher in stature than the business analyst path, then you want to determine what is the category. Is this just one job, one position, or is there a category that you can create a base resume for? And then that category you can focus the content for, right? So let's say if the category is director of, let's say if the category is director of XYZ, right, which is a step above what a business analyst does, then you can create a base for that and then focus its content for that particular employer whom you said has a hidden job. You can even change the title for that particular job if you need to, but you will have a base resume as your point of focus. It will be very difficult to do it any other way unless you develop a category. Cecilia writes, business analyst, no, it would not meet my salary requirements and it is a position I have outgrown. Recruiters told me to stay away from this type of job. Companies won't hire me because they can tell it would bore me easily. Okay, well, that's a personal choice. I disagree with the idea that it would bore you because, it not paying your minimum salary requirements is different than a job boring you. If it doesn't pay your minimum salary requirements, then you're right, you shouldn't pursue the position. If it does pay your true minimum salary requirements, then my suggestion always is get to learn to enjoy the job while you pursue a position with your dream career, right? But in this case, it doesn't pay your minimum salary requirements, so that point is moot. If it did, I suggest, regardless of it boring you or not, you take on the position, do a good job at it. It helps you develop experience while you're pursuing a job in another area. But again, the point is irrelevant if it doesn't pay your salary requirements. So Cecilia, my point is we've got to create a category before we can really create content for your resume. We are not in the we don't want to be involved in the activity of creating one resume per job. That strategy doesn't work. And recruiters, they can give you all kinds of suggestions that it appeals to them achieving their objective. They have a direct objective they're looking to achieve, and they can give you suggestions that helps them achieve their goals, but that doesn't mean necessarily those suggestions would be the best ones for you when applying for other positions outside of what that recruiter has. Cecilia writes, I built a resume on the job description for Director of Sustainability for CRO Association. Okay, very good. So Director of Sustainability, if there are more jobs for that particular position, then you want to create a base resume for that and then focus your resume of Director of Sustainability on CRO Association when you integrate job description content. So here, let me take a look at the resume you sent me and look at the job description to see if there's any relevancy between the two. Give me a moment to pull up your resume, Cecilia. Okay, so I have the job description here. Structuring, staffing, corporate. Oh, it's a guidebook that you send me. Structuring, staffing, guidebook. Yeah, I don't know what to do with that. I thought that was a job description. So at any rate, I don't know what to do with this resume, Cecilia. And if you want my opinion on this, I think it's you're welcome to create a resume that focuses on that particular job. But I think that process, let's say you create a resume that focuses on that particular job, you go to an interview, they choose someone else. Now you're back to square one again, creating resumes for another job. And that process just doesn't work. It may, you may create a resume for that particular job and get hired, but if it does not, it takes so much time to sustain that strategy. It's not a process that is sustainable. If you get the position, then it's great, but if you don't, then it just takes too much time to manage that particular process. Yeah, this resume has so much that it describes about different responsibilities. I don't even know where to go with it. So that's my suggestion. If you have any other questions, Cecilia, feel free to ask me about it. Let's go to another resume here. I'm going to go to Marilyn Taylor. Let's see here. Here's Marilyn's resume. Okay, so Marilyn, it looks like we haven't transferred this resume into the format we spoke about, right? So what we want on the very top is your path. So you want customer service on the very top, and here you want to start out with your qualification summary, which is about a paragraph, and that qualification summary should talk about what would make a great customer service professional, why you would be a great customer service professional. Now, as I read this, customer service with 15 plus years combined office experience, as soon as I talk about office, it takes away the focus from customer service. Remember, this is your base resume, right? So in your base resume, you want to speak about everything that has to do with customer service. And although some employers may hire for office customer service, I don't think every company in your area would do that, right? Would be hiring for office customer service. So for that reason, we only include what every employer in your area wants when hiring for customer service, and office may not be part of that. So with 15 plus years combined and in assisting in several apartment complexes, see how that takes away from your base? Now it's becoming focused on apartment complexes. San Diego, that becomes focused on a specific territory. What if you were willing to drive to a different area than San Diego, North County? Your base resume should not limit you. Now, when applying to this position that's in North San Diego, you can always job description integrate San Diego, North County into your resume, but in your base, you don't want to speak about that. So what I'll do, Marilyn, is give you some time to think about the concepts we spoke about last week and transition your resume from what it is now into the concepts we talked about. And then next week, I'll be happy to look at this again and give you some suggestions on it. Okay, I have time for one or two other resumes, and then I want to move on. I want to continue on our agenda about today's session. We have time for one more resume before the break, and then we'll do one after the break. Let me go to Anne. So here's Anne's resume, and she writes that she's done the first part of this. So here's Anne's resume. I'm going to take her information off here. Vice President of Product Development. So if I was to search this online, I'm curious as to how many jobs I would find. And can you tell us where this path stands on your master's list? So I'm not finding any positions for that particular title. Okay, so Anne writes, she found 77 jobs for, now, did you find jobs for product development or vice president of product development? So if you were to search for vice president of product development, are there 77 jobs for that? Or are there 77 jobs for product development and you want to be in a position of vice president for that particular path? I'm waiting for Anne. So now the reason I asked that question is that if I was to create a base and I create a base for product development, I have a base resume that I can send out to any company that hires for that, right? But I can always then add vice president to that particular resume, to that particular base resume that started with product development. I can always add vice president later. But the content that I'm writing is for product development, and not vice president of product development, because those are two totally different resumes. Now, if I'm a vice president of product development, I have everything that a product development resume would have, but then I have some other things that a product development resume would not have, right? So I first want to put everything that I would have, then I can add all those things that only a vice president would have on my vice president resume. That's why you can't go the other way. You can't put vice president, create a resume that's focused on that. You want to first create a product development resume, then add vice president to it, because you don't want to be perceived as overqualified or underqualified when you create this resume. You want to be perceived as perfectly qualified. Okay, so Ann writes, Vice President of Product Development. So let's assume that there are 77 jobs for Vice President of Product Development. And we're going to read it as such. Executive with passion for enabling commercial success of new technologies, transformative leader with background focusing teams to achieve corporate goals, communicator with the ability to synthesize information and make it understandable to all levels. Let's make this idea manufacturable. Okay, so what I'm assuming, Anne, is that this content here, under your qualification summary, is constructed after reading lots of job descriptions for Vice President Product Development. And after you read a lot of job descriptions pertaining to Vice President of Product Development, you came up with this paragraph to demonstrate your skills, to demonstrate your strength as a Vice President of Product Development. Since I haven't read any job descriptions for this path, I have to rely on your judgment to determine this is a good paragraph. Right? I couldn't tell you it isn't, I couldn't tell you it is, because I haven't read job descriptions for Vice President of Product Development. Now, if I had a couple of job descriptions, I could give you an opinion on that. Now, same thing with skills profile. All the words that you chose here, you're telling me, were included in all the job descriptions I read regarding Vice President of Product Development. They all wanted these things. If some of them don't want a flexible person, then you want to remove it from your base resume. But when you put it on your base resume, you're saying they all wanted these qualities. Okay, so then you have consultant, global project management. So I would suggest we put the company on top, take focus away from the company by making it smaller and unboldening it, right? Because the name of the company is not as important when a hiring manager looks at your resume as is your title. Now, the word consultant could be a good title, it could be a poor one. It could be a good title in that when you put the word consultant as your title, again, we're not concerned with what your title was. We're concerned with what you gained as a skill when working with global project management as it relates to the path of Vice President Product Development. So let's take our break. When we come back, we'll talk about the title here. It's 10:01. We're going to meet back here at 10 minutes past 10. So I have that on the screen now. And we were, the creator of this resume has clearly done a great job. You have the path here, you have the qualification summary here, you have the skills profile, and then when we look at the title, we want to communicate through that title how we have acquired the skills that a Vice President of Product Development requires for this particular position. Now, I don't know if the title consultant communicates that or not. But I can tell you that if this company is looking for a person long-term, the word consultant would convey or negate that idea, would convey the opposite of that idea. Because what does a consultant do? A consultant goes in, does some consulting, leaves, and goes into another organization, does some more consulting. And if that title conveys that idea, and the company that's hiring for Vice President of Product Development is not looking for that, then there is a discrepancy there, right? So the only thing I would share with you about this resume is that the title needs to best communicate those skills that were acquired at Global Project Management as it relates to Vice President of Product Development. Job well done. So this is very good. Let's go to the last resume here. And I have several other people who have sent me emails to look at their resumes, but I just don't have enough time to go through all of them. Let me select this one here that came through. Actually, this is Helen Ruth's resume. Helen, if you could please transition your resume from what you have here to what we've talked about in class. So you want to have a path, you want to have a qualification summary that describes that path, and it seems to me you have the content here to do that, right? So you have a lot of good content, but you want to transition it to what we've spoken about, so you have an effective skills doc that you could send out. And this resume really I can't speak to because it's not following that format. And let's see if we could do one more here, because that one I couldn't do. Give me just one moment here to pull up one more resume here. Okay. Let's look at Amy's resume. So here's Amy's resume. I'm going to pull this up. So we have office assistant. Again, I want to do a search of office assistant to see how many jobs exist. And then let's assume that there are hundreds of jobs or lots of jobs for office assistants. Then I look at the qualification summary, and there it reads, office professional with 30 years of experience. Now, remember that years of experience does not always translate to something positive. You know, what if this company is looking for someone that doesn't have as much experience because they believe that people who don't have as much experience are more apt to adapt. They are more flexible. They don't bring a lot of ingrained qualities that are hard to change. I'm not saying that's always true. I'm saying, what if the company prefers that? So could we change office professional with years of experience, or many years of experience, or multiple years of experience, and 30 then doesn't represent a risk? Now, if you have a company that says, we want someone with over 25 years of experience, then you could integrate that content for that employer into your resume. But your base would only include what you see on the screen. Your base would say with years of experience. And then it looks like this could continue. So office professional with years of experience, maybe you put capable of handling customers in person and over the phone. Okay, so, or you can say fully skilled at handling customers in person and over the phone. Now remember, the qualification summary is a working in progress. You continuously want to work to empower your qualification summary, and sometimes that doesn't happen overnight. You know, sometimes that takes months, sometimes it takes years. That doesn't mean you don't stop applying for jobs. You keep sending your resume out while you're working on enhancing your qualification summary. So these are good skills profile. I suspect you're still working on it because there's 2 team players here, so you're still probably working on it. Then let's go to professional experience. I would take the cities out. It's irrelevant where Bank of America was. What's relevant is that for Bank of America, you did something that had to do with office assistance. It doesn't matter where it's located. Now here we have customer service and sales specialist. How does that relate to office assistants? Well, it does in some ways, but it doesn't in other ways. Can this be misinterpreted by the reader? Yeah, it can be. So the question I want to ask you, Amy, is what are some things you did for Bank of America that were office related? And you may say, let me see if I can unmute Amy. Hopefully there's not a lot of background noise. Amy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Amy. Did you do any office assistance type activities for Bank of America?
It was primarily just call center experience, but heavily on customer service. So um, when um, and like I said in my email, this is just, I just pulled it from my old resume. I didn't tweak it or anything for Office, but I think the Office experience would be computer work, data entry, people skills.
So let's say what an office assistant does are the following. I'm going to type some of them here as functions, right? So let's say you did data entry. Did you do any data entry?
Yes.
Let's say you answered phones.
Yes.
Let's say you spoke to customers.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you, did you read any reports or any documents, or did you have to interpret any documents or do any filing, or think about what an office person does. Did you?
I would have to analyze customer statements.
Analyze statements. Did you have to operate computer devices?
Yes, that was our whole job, was on computers.
So I just selected randomly some office assistance roles or tasks or skills, and it looks like you were involved for Bank of America with office tasks. For instance, if I said, did you do data entry? And you said, no, I painted walls. Mm-hmm. And I said, did you answer phones? You said, no, I cleaned them. Mm-hmm. And if I said, did you speak to customers? You said, no, I was really in a cubicle and never talked to a customer. Then we couldn't say that you were engaged in office activities of any kind, right? But it seems like you were. So although you were involved with sales and customer service, it seems like you were involved with office as well. Mm-hmm. So now we have, I'm going to take these out, right? I'm going to take these tasks out, and I'm going to put these functions as what you did for Bank of America. So you did customer service, you did sales, you did office. Which one of these three roles fits best what you have on top here for your path?
It would absolutely be the office.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put office here. I'm going to take the rest out because it's irrelevant to this particular resume. Mm-hmm. Now, when you talk to the hiring manager or anyone from Bank of for this new employer you're applying to, let's say you're applying to Wells Fargo, and if the hiring manager from Wells Fargo was to call you, you would say, thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to call me. I'm applying for your office assistant position. I work for Bank of America as a customer service agent or as a sales representative, but my role was predominantly working in an office, and here's what I did. And then the bullets would describe what you did, right?
Okay.
So now what we do is we work on the bullets. So the bullets, remember, have two parts to them. The first part is the responsibility. The second part is the successful outcome. So let's say here you put delighting our cardholders with exceptional service. So that's very good. I like your choice of words there. So you can say here, delighting our cardholders with, by the way, anytime we use adjectives on a resume, it decreases the credibility of the content. So if we say extraordinary, if we say great, if we say things like exceptional, it only negates the word that follows it. It gives the opposite impression of the word that follows it. So if you say I'm an exceptional manager, you're really saying I'm not a very good manager. Don't ask me why that happens. That's just the way it is when you put a lot of adjectives. The resumes that are effective are resumes that stick to facts. So if you were delighting your cardholders with outstanding service, the fact is that you were giving them good service, right? So you say delighting our cardholders with let's put a factual phrase that shows you offered them some sort of service with customer service on the phone and in person. See, now I have a factual statement. It's not one that's surrounded by adjectives, but by facts. So this is my responsibility, and now I translate adjectives into outcomes. I talk about, if you're saying it was exceptional, then write it in terms of an outcome. What happened when you delighted the cardholders with customer service on the phone and in person? Let's say it resulted in being recognized, or you can just put recognized by management as the most valuable office. And I'm not saying those are words you should choose. You know, I'm just thinking these off the cuff. It takes some time for you to really go through your content and make sure your words are carefully chosen. So when you look at this now, I have 2 lines. The first part of the line talks about my responsibilities. The second talks about my outcome. And you want to do the same thing with all the bullets, right? It looks like this one talks about customer service. It helps to put the idea you're trying to convey on that bullet in a form of a term. Just visually, you're not going to put this in the resume, but just visually so you can see it. So this one conveys customer service. So I've already talked about customer service. I'm going to take this out. This one talks about meeting and exceeding guest services with every call taken. Same thing is what we're talking about up here, right? So I'm going to take that out. Received awards from upper management for great customer experiences. That's also same thing. I consistently receive complimented calls with customers. Same thing, right? So all 4 bullets were really conveying the same thing. Let's convey your working with computers. So this would be 1 bullet. Then the next bullet would talk about your analyzing statements. Right, and so that would be your 3rd bullet. And so what you would do is you talk about your responsibility of analyzing bullets and then talk about the positive outcome. On this one, you talk about your ability to work with different types of computer programs, how versatile you are in working with computers, and your knowledge of maybe the Microsoft suite. And each one of these bullets would focus on a specific idea without defocusing the conversation to some other idea. And so that's what you would do on the resume. Did you have any questions, Amy?
No, that's good. That's kind of really where I saw your last week, and it kind of confused me a little bit as to what I did and then positive outcomes. And I'm like, I just didn't make, I mean, I knew what you were saying. It just didn't make sense to me on how to write it, but this makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask next week, and I'll be happy to answer them for you next week.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay, thanks.
All right. Very good. So let me get this. What is your email address, Amy? I got it. I got it right here.
Okay.
There we go. All right. So I just sent it out to you. The little work that we did on your resume, I sent it over. And with that, I'm going to move on. I want to share with everybody just a couple of more things here on the resume, and then we're going to move on to the phone interview. As you saw today, we looked at some resumes that had not completely transitioned from the old way of doing the resume to this new way of how we communicate our message. And this is something that will continue on for some people even after graduation. Excuse me. You know, there was in our first class, class number 1 in Monrovia. This is class 9, obviously, that you're going through. A group of people graduated, and in that group there was an older lady that was sitting in the front. You know, she must have been about 75 or 76, and I thought to myself, boy, if there's anyone that's going to have difficulty putting a resume together and doing this thing here and get employers to call her, it's her. Because she was kind of shy, she was really reserved, wouldn't talk to anyone. Her head was down throughout the sessions, and I thought she's probably not picking up the content, the information. Although I knew age has nothing to do with an applicant's viability, I know that participation is important, right? So those who participate do far better than those who do not. And the fact that she seemed to not be participating, I thought she'll have difficulty. Well, in the 6th session, in our last sessions, she approaches me. And she says, Fred, I want you to look at my resume. And I look at her resume. And that's when I learned something. I learned that you never prejudge anyone. And that when I thought she wasn't paying attention, clearly when I looked at her resume, she absorbed every piece of information. Her resume was awesome. You know, she had the path, she had the qualification summary, she had all of the titles done correctly. And I want to show you her resume. This was the resume that she created, right? So she has the path to qualification summary. And although a lot of things in this resume can still be worked on, it's pretty good for someone whom you conclude is not paying attention. You know, she clearly was focusing on all the ideas that we spoke about. And if you look at the titles are strong. You know, she put track record here. She put all the titles here to match her path. Make a long story short, she sent this resume out. And within a week, she got 3 interviews. And one of those interviews was with the YMCA in her city. And they hired her. And the pay that they're paying her is far more than her minimum salary requirements. And she's still employed at that organization. And then there was another gentleman in that same class. This guy was verbally well-spoken. He was a teacher and was looking for a teaching job. Nicest guy you'll meet. And I thought, this guy will find employment very quickly. He'll have no problems. Well, months after graduation, although Gloria had already placed a position, he was having difficulty finding employment. So he sent me an email, and this was his email to me. This was the email, right? And I responded. I said, his email basically said, hey, Fred, can you look at my resume and tell me what you think? I'm not getting any responses from this resume. So I responded back with him saying, hey, Ron, this resume really is not formatted correctly. You know, this resume has a lot of issues on it because it's not formatted. For one, it doesn't have a path. It had his name on the very top. Then he sent me another resume, and I said, okay, I'm glad to see this resume. The one you sent me earlier seemed to show you never attended our sessions. Ron, you are definitely a catch for any company, but we need to demonstrate that in your resume. Now, he had written the following for me. He had written, it's difficult to email you various job descriptions based on the variety of positions I've applied for. I've applied for everything from driver to Goodwill to assistant store manager to school counselor to college admissions. And you want to see the resume he was sending for all of these different positions? He was sending this resume to all of those different positions. Now look at this resume. It doesn't have a path. It clearly talks about high school counseling, but if you're sending this for a position of driver or a position, and you know, some of those positions that he had mentioned, clearly these are not matches for those positions. Now the question I have for you is this. Can you look at this resume and identify the issues? And what would be some of the issues that you can identify? The reason I ask you this question is because I want to make sure you have the eye now to identify problems with a resume that doesn't work, right? Well, if he was to send this resume to a driving position, a company that hired drivers, what would be the problem? Go ahead and send me some of your thoughts. Yeah, Mary writes, not a clear job path and overqualified. Yeah, exactly right. Very good. So he's conveying overqualification for position of driving. Helen writes, he does not have driving skills. Yeah, very good. So he may have driving skills because he drives every day, right, from home to work and back. So he probably knows how to drive, but he's not conveying his skills of driving. And obviously, if he's applying for a driving job, he's thinking to himself, he's got some qualifications for that position, but he's not conveying that on the resume. Anne writes, not clear that he wants a driving position. Very good. Amy writes, there's no focus, no point. What does he want to do? Yeah, very good. Helen writes, that's an assumption. Mel writes, doesn't highlight driving background. Very good. And you know, the other problem with this resume is, if he's applying for a teaching job, the word bank and the word Pittsburgh and the word officer contradict the teaching background. The leads system analyst does that too, you know. So there's a lot of issues with this resume. You know, the volunteer work, you know, you look at this and you see there's a lot of issues with this resume. So I'm hoping that by now you've developed the eye for what works and what doesn't. What's a good resume and what's a poor resume. And if by next week you still have questions about this, send me your resume before the session. So right before the session starts, send me your resume and say, hey, Fred, can you look at my resume? And I'll be happy to do that next week. Don't give me an old resume. Don't give me a resume that hasn't been transitioned yet with a path and a qualification summary. Instead, show me a resume that you've made the transition to, and I'll go through that resume for you. Very good. Good job, everybody. So I'm hoping that by now you've developed an idea as to what we want to do with our resumes before we send it out to an employer. What we want to do now is talk about the phone interview. And the phone interview, its content is in Guide 3. This is Guide 3, and you all should have received it already. Guide 3 talks about the phone interview, and we're going to go to page 21 of the guide. Now, you don't need to open the guide. I'm going to go through this with you. So there's the preparation steps, and there's the 4-point process. These are the two that we're going to talk about for the phone interview. To be successful at the phone interview, you want to first prepare by going through 13 steps. And we're going to cover those 13 steps. Then you want to learn the 4-point process. The 4-point process is a series of steps that consists of 4 steps that is aimed at moving the phone interview into a face-to-face interview. Now remember, when an employer calls you, that employer has an objective. And what do you think is the employer's objective when they call you? Well, there was a time their point was to screen you in. See, if I had only 10 resumes and I spent $1,200 placing an ad to get those 10 resumes, I'm hoping I can interview every single one of those applicants. So when I call those applicants, I'm calling in with the intent of screening those applicants in. But if I have 1,000 resumes, I can't interview every person, right? So I'm going to screen out a lot of these resumes by just quickly skimming through them. And let's say I look at 5 resumes, or let's say I look at 20 resumes I really like. Well, I can't interview all 20 resumes in one day. Because remember, I get another 1,000 resumes tomorrow. I get another 1,000 resumes the day after. So I can't skim the 1,000 resumes to get it down to 20 and interview those 20 people in one day. And then interview 20 people tomorrow. And then interview 20 people the day after that. It's just not possible. So what do I do to ensure out of these 20 resumes I really like, I can get 1 or 2 of them to an interview? What do I do? Well, what I do is I call them. Maybe I don't call all 20. Maybe from the 20, I manage to screen out another 10 or 15, and I'm left with 5, and then I call those 5 people. Now remember, if you follow the principles we talked about in regards to how to construct your resume and best communicate your skills, you're going to be among the top 5 that they're going to call. Then it becomes your ability to handle the interview, the phone interview, that determines if you're going to make it as one of those 1 or 2 that are going to be face-to-face with that employer. So your ability to handle the phone interview, although you have a great resume, is really key, is extremely important. That's why there are 13 steps we take to prepare and then 4 steps to take to schedule an appointment. So remember when we created our resume, our focus was to get a phone call? That was our objective, right? To get a phone call? What is our objective from the phone interview? What do you think is our objective from the phone interview? Is it to get a job? Is it to get the hiring manager to connect with us? Is it to do what? Very good. Face-to-face interview. That's exactly right. The only objective from the phone interview is to get a face-to-face interview, right? So let's go over the preparation steps. I'm not going to go through all of them. You have the guide to go through. You can learn about the 13, but I'm just going to quickly go through some of the important ones. Let me make this a little bit larger for everybody. Okay, so preparation step number 1. Again, these are 13 preparation steps to prepare us for the 4-point process. The 4-point process are 4 steps we take that schedule the interview. But before we can take those 4 steps, we got to prepare by going through 13 steps. So the first step is you want to have a high learning index. Now, to identify your learning index, you want to look at your willingness to learn and your willingness to change. Now, think about this for a moment. If I was to score you on your willingness to learn, just your willingness to learn, what would you score it from 1 to 10? Are you open to new things? Do you like to learn new things? Like if I said, hey, do you want to learn how to design a website? Would you say yes, or would you say, no, I don't want to? If I said, hey, do you want to go to the mountains and hike? Would you say, yeah, or would you say, no, I don't want to? From 1 to 10, generally, are you more open to new things or less? Put that on a piece of paper right now. From 1 to 10. Okay, so you have a number. You may have a 2 or a 3 or a 9 or a 10. Next, you ask yourself, what is my willingness to change from 1 to 10? So next to that number, willingness to learn, put a number for your willingness to change. For instance, if I said to you, you should change your religion, would you say, are you crazy? Or would you say, well, tell me why? Are you willing to listen, hear? You don't have to change, but at least you have an open mind to change. What if I said, you have this affinity for a particular game, let's say soccer, and I say, okay, let's stop playing soccer. Don't play soccer anymore. Start playing football. Would you be open to learn football and not play soccer and play football? What is your willingness to change? Now, you may say, no, I don't want to change or even consider changing my religion, and I don't want to change from a sport that I already like. Well, that's fine. Just kind of rate yourself. You don't have to change anything. You just want to rate your willingness to do so. So rate it. Now, if you put a number for willingness to learn and a number for willingness to change, multiply the 2 together and you get a total number. Now, it's a problem if that number becomes a 0, because think about if your willingness to learn is 10, but your willingness to change is 0, 10 times 0 is still 0, and vice versa. Right? So you want to get a number and increase that number. You want to increase that number to 100, because 10 times 10 would be 100, right? And the higher your learning index, the more successful you're going to be at the phone interview, because phone interview is a skill. And let me see if I have the skill. Okay, before I go over that, I want to talk to you about what a skill is. You know, skill is something you acquire when you repeat a task over and over again. Now, we as humans share that one thing in common, that when you repeat anything, you'll become great at it. Now, for some of you, you must repeat that thing 10 times to become great at it. For others, you must repeat it 100 times. But I can become just as good as you in any area, and you can become just as good as me in any area, as long as you're willing to repeat the process as many times as it takes for you. See, for you it may take 20 times, for me it may take 100 times. But it doesn't matter how many times it takes. What matters is your willingness to repeat the process. Now, answering the phone when an employer calls you, answering questions and handling the phone call is a skill. And you all can master the skill of turning a phone interview into an interview. But you must be willing to practice. You must be willing to put things in its right order and practice that order in order for you to be successful. It's easy to say, well, so-and-so is better at it because, you know, Michael Jordan is great at basketball because, you know, it's easy to say that, right? But the truth is, Michael Jordan was not born a talented basketball player. He failed at making his varsity basketball team twice. He practiced basketball 8 hours a day until he became the person he is today. You know, he did this until the day he retired. He practiced 8 hours a day until the day he retired. If you look at anyone who's been successful in anything, they weren't born that way. Well, of course, you know, there is the Beethovens of the world. You know, there are the Mozarts of the world who are born musicians. But those people are far and few in between. If you look at the average population, people who succeed, people with disadvantages who become masters at what they do, they become that way through practice, through repetition. Now, if I gave you a golf club and I said, swing this club, how would you swing the golf club? You would swing it like a baseball bat if you had never played golf. If you had never, I'm sorry, I said baseball bat. Let me change the example. If you had never played golf and I gave you a golf club, how would you swing the club naturally? You would swing it like a baseball bat, right? Now, the natural way of doing things is always the least effective manner in handling any situation. Just like in playing golf, if I gave you a golf club and I said swing it, and you'd never played golf, you would swing it like a baseball bat, but that's the least effective manner in playing golf. To become great at golf, you learn a structured, almost scientific manner in swinging this thing we call a golf club. Now, this swing feels uncomfortable, but eventually, through practice, it becomes very comfortable, and then the natural way becomes uncomfortable, right? So what we want to do is take a series of strategies, practice them, and although initially it feels uncomfortable, make them the natural way, make them the instinctive way of how we handle the phone interview. So that happens when your willingness to learn and your willingness to change are both high. Next, have knowledge and have motivation. Have you ever met someone who's very knowledgeable but not motivated? What happens to this person? There's no energy, right? What happens to a person who is motivated but has no knowledge? Disadvantaged, right? But if you have both, then you become more effective. You have an advantage. Number 3, learn to tell stories. Now, what I want you to do now is close your eyes. Close your eyes or put your head down. And I want you to imagine the following. I want you to imagine that you're a hiring manager and you're interviewing 2 people. And you ask the first applicant to casually explain his role or her role at a previous job. And the first applicant responds in one way, then you get the second applicant to come in, and the second applicant responds in kind of the same way, but it feels different. Tell me which one of these two applicants you like more, the first one or the second one. Put your head down or close your eyes. Ready? Here's the first applicant. You say, hey, tell me about your role at your previous job. And the applicant says, I worked for Alta Vista Corporation for 8 years. I was a marketing manager there, and I helped increase revenue for the company by 20%. I really enjoyed working there. That's the first applicant. He leaves. The second applicant walks in, and you ask him the same question. Hey, tell me about your role at your previous job. And the applicant says, I worked for Alta Vista Company. The company was founded by a father and a son. Now, they started the company from their garage in 1989, and today it's a publicly traded company worth $60 million. Now, when I started working for Alta Vista, they had already tried several marketing options, spending hundreds of thousands on various strategies. When they hired me, they needed 21st century advice. Most of the marketing strategies they were using were outdated. Through a series of innovative marketing tactics, our team transformed the company into the largest retail store in Yuma, increasing their sales by 20%. Tell me, out of those two people, which one's descriptions did you like the most? They both said they work for Alta Vista Company. They both said they increased sales by 20%. Which one did you like and why? Did you like the first one or the second one, and why? Go ahead. Give me your feedback. You can open your eyes now. Mary writes, I like the second because he was more specific and interesting, actually talking about his experience there. Sandra writes, the second one forms pictures with the words, making it more memorable, tells a story. Cecilia writes, first one, it was to the point. If I want details about how it was done, I would ask. Amy writes, the second one, they showed knowledge of the company. Parastu asks, I like the first more. Anne asks, the second one, there was knowledge, enthusiasm, and context. Parastu writes, less detail. Troy writes, second one tells a story. Helen writes, the second, it gave me results. Mel writes, the second one, because it was vivid and details oriented. Very good. Okay, so now, for those of you that said, I like less detail, if we were computers, and we had no emotion, and we said to the person, tell me XYZ, and I typed that in, then I would want them to type back in XYZ. I want to hear exactly what I ask. I want a specific response. If we were computers, that would be the most ideal approach. But the truth is we're not computers. We're humans, and we have emotions. And hiring managers tend to hire people that they like. This is an important facet of why people get hired. Sometimes it has very little to do with qualifications. I mean, again, if you were applying to a computer, you would put in your qualifications. It would then make a choice, a logical choice, based on how it was programmed to choose. But humans don't operate that way. When you tell a story, you're making the information more personal. You're also building pictures for that individual. Now, we think in terms of pictures. If you talk to anyone who is a student of memorization, if I was to give you a list of 200 names, you could memorize those names by associating those names to an image. But you would have more of a difficult time trying to memorize them by just memorizing the words. See, we think in terms of pictures, and we have emotional outputs when those images are created. Like if I say, imagine and then I gave you a word that's disgusting, not only would you see that word, you would feel that word. You know, I I could give you a word, but I don't want to. You know what those words are. You know, that can create a reprehensible image. So when you answer in just a few words, you become like every other applicant. You may think that that's a better way to respond because it's short and it's concise. Of course you want to be short and concise. There's no question about that. But there's a difference between being short and concise and telling a story. You could tell a story and still be short and concise, right? But if you don't tell a story and you're just short and concise, you risk falling into the same bowl as every other applicant that's either short and concise or talks about things that are irrelevant. You know, it seems like as a hiring manager, you get two different types of applicants. Those who answer the questions without any description, and those who describe things for so long it becomes boring, irrelevant. You know, some applicants talk for a long time and others don't talk with enough description. The truth is you don't want to talk a lot in an interview. But when you talk, you want to be specific to the question while you support it with a story, right? So let's say you say to me, Fred, why should we hire you? If you ask me that question, I could ramble on for half an hour about why I think you should hire me. I can say, well, you should hire me because I'm motivated, I'm dedicated, I'm loyal, I'm exciting to work with, I'm a team player. And all of those things would not mean anything to you because you've heard people say those things and hired them even, and everything they said was untrue after you hired them. But if I said to you, well, you should hire me because you're expanding in China, you need someone who speaks Chinese, and you're looking for someone who can go to another country dealing with a foreign culture and be able to effectively establish a relationship with them. Now I tell a story. I say, with my previous company, I was frequently in a position where I had to build relationships with people from foreign countries. In one instance, there was this, and then I talk about what happened. So I answer with a specific response, but then I tell a story to support that response. That is far more effective than just having a brief response. Okay, let's go to the next point. Preparation step 4, watch your tone of voice. I'll let you read that in the guide. Listen attentively. Now this is a really important one. Have you ever come across talking to someone whom you knew when you're talking to them is not really listening to you, but they are really formulating a response as you're talking to them? Have you ever come across people like that? Like you're talking to someone and you can tell by the way they're looking at you, they're already formulating a response, and before you're done, they cut you short and they tell you what they think. Well, see, there's a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is when sound bites hit your earlobes and bounce off. You know, you've heard a sound. You've heard the police car, you know, the siren. You've heard someone talking to you and what their voice sounds like, but you haven't listened to what they said, because listening is the process of interpreting what they're saying without necessarily producing a response. You know, understanding what people are saying to you without feeling the need to judge or respond or share an opinion. That's what listening is. Listening is to remain quiet and really pay attention to what that person is telling you and trying to read between the lines of what they're telling you. This is important in an interview because hiring managers frequently tell you exactly what they're looking for. if you're too busy formulating a response, you're going to miss what they're asking you, what they want you to be, or what they want you to present to them. So you can read more about that in the guide. Learn to relax. That's number 6. Number 7 is view the best in every situation. Number 8, raise the curiosity, not satisfy it. Right? I'll let you read about that in point 8, and if you have any questions about that, we can talk about it. This is an extremely important one here. Raise curiosity, not satisfy it during the phone interview. Number 9, never get too attached to any position. So when you're applying for a job, don't be attached to any particular position. There's always better positions around the corner. Number 10, value your skills without conveying arrogance. Number 11, prepare the phone interview profile, the PIP, prior to the call. The PIP is a folder that you put on your desk, and in that folder you have the job description and the resume you sent to that employer, together with the research you did for that employer. So let's say if I apply to Pepsi, I will have their job description. Let's say I apply for an operations position. I will have the job description, I will have the resume I sent them, and I will have the research I did about the company. So when the hiring manager calls me, I have all of that information right in front of me. With one click, I can pull up the resume I sent them, I can pull up the job description, and I can pull up the research I did about the company. Your grandma cannot answer the call. What this means is on your resume, you should have the phone number that goes directly to you and not someone else. For this reason, you should not put your home number, if other people live with you, on your resume. I called an applicant once, and we were very interested in this applicant. He had all the qualifications we wanted based on what we saw in the resume. And when I called the applicant, I called the phone number that was on the resume. And grandma picked up. I know it was probably his grandma because she was older and she managed to recite those words in English, but every other word that we needed to communicate, she could not communicate because she spoke a different language. And I didn't speak her language, she didn't speak mine. And I understood some things like not here and, grandma, but obviously because we couldn't communicate, eventually we hung up. And to this date, I haven't heard from that applicant. I don't even know he got the message that I had called, because I did attempt to leave a message. But I called the number that was on the resume. Right? So you want to make sure if you're leaving a number on the resume, it's a number that either goes to a voice message that's dedicated to getting calls from employers, or it's a number that only you answer, and you answer it when you know you can talk to the employer with your PIP in front of you, with your phone interview profile in front of you. Believe. And that's the 13th step, right? So believe that you are the best applicant for the job. Let's take our break. It's 11:02, and we're going to meet back at 11:10. I'll see you in 10 minutes. Excuse me one moment. I want to make sure that my audio is on. Can you all hear me? Very good. Okay, great. Thank you. Great. So when the call comes in, or when I go to an interview, I'm highly interested in the idea, in the strategy of arguing my point. Remember, I want to argue my point because really there is no truth when you think about it. Really, truth doesn't exist. What really exists is a great argument. I'm talking in terms of finding employment. there's really a good argument. Whose argument is better? See, if I was to ask you, who's a better applicant for this job? Who's more qualified? There is no truth. What really exists is whose argument is better. Who can argue more effectively to demonstrate that they are a better person for this particular position. And employers choose that person. They choose not the most qualified, not the best looking, not the person who dresses the best, but the person who can argue their point more effectively. Now, we talked about what an argument is last week. An argument consists of a series of premises supported to arrive at a conclusion. So if my conclusion is you should hire me, I must come up with a series of premises that supports that conclusion. Now, my premise could be you should hire me because I'm motivated, I'm dedicated, I'm loyal. Those are my premises. And I can support that by evidence. But those are not very strong premises, right? Premises that are effective are usually the ones that are focused on the employer's job description. So for instance, why should you hire me? Because you're expanding into China. That's my first premise. Because you're looking for someone who speaks Chinese. That's my second premise. And you're looking for someone to build relationships with people in foreign countries or build foreign relations. And that's my third premise. So I have three premises, but I don't have backup for each one. So then I would say, you're expanding into China. Now I know this because when I did research online, I learned that your organization has spent the last year building infrastructure to create a market in China. So that's my evidence that you're expanding into China. Then I would say I speak Chinese. Now, what is the evidence? Well, I have spent the last 10 years sharpening my Chinese skill. In fact, I'm so, my Chinese language, and I'm so good at it that most people I speak to who speak Chinese can't distinguish my accent. I have even picked up their accent to a point where they feel like I'm one of them when I speak to them. And you're looking to build foreign relations, and then you want to give them evidence as to why you would be the best fit as someone who's effective at building foreign relations. So now, not only did I provide three premises, but I had evidence to support my conclusion. Right? So that's really important for us to remember when we're talking about the resume and handling the phone interview. Every day we're faced with arguments trying to persuade us about something that's not supported. For instance, here's a conclusion. There are no jobs out there. Think about it. Next time you hear this, what is the premise and what is the evidence that supports that premise? Employers prefer younger applicants. What is the premise and what is the evidence that supports that premise? By the way, 30% of people who are looking for employment today, this is based on a poll we took of 4,000 applicants, 30% of them, and the pool of these applicants were very diverse. So they were all different types of ethnicities, different ages. Among them, they were younger, they were older. And 30% of them determined that age is the reason they are not employed. Some of them attributed the economy to why they're unemployed. Some of them attributed skills gap to why they're unemployed, meaning that they don't have the skills employers want. There were all kinds of reasons that they had as a choice. 30% of them chose age. Coincidentally, excuse me, coincidentally, there were just as many people blaming young age to why they're not employed as there were those who were blaming old age to why they're not employed. Now, do you believe that argument? That age is the reason why some are not employed? We know that this is a fallacy of a single cause, meaning that the assumption that one single cause is responsible for any outcome without exploring other possible causes. So is this argument supported? Employers prefer younger applicants. Is this argument supported? I want to hear from one of you that says, yes, it is. Is there anyone on this call that believes employers really prefer younger applicants? In that if you're, let's say, 70 or 75, and there was someone else with comparable skills who was 25, the employer would choose the one that's 25 and not the one that's 75. Is there any of you that believes in that? So while some of you are typing this out, I'll tell you what my experience is. Typically, those who believe there is merit to this, they believe there is merit in employers hiring younger applicants, they usually try to back up their claim by some experience that they've had. So if you ask them, what is your premise, what is your evidence that this does exist, that employers prefer younger applicants, they would say, well, I know it's true because it happened to me. And you say, well, tell us about your experience. And usually that leads to a place where there's a lot of unclarity. Things are foggy, you know. It's like, well, I was at an interview and the hiring manager didn't hire me. You know, well, why didn't the hiring manager hire you? Well, it's like, I don't know, they just didn't hire me. Well, why not? Well, I know it's because of my age. Well, what do you think happened that contributed to them making this decision based on your age? I don't know. It was just them telling me that they don't want to hire me. And usually there is no real solid answer as to the validity of that experience. So I'm going to make an argument against this with you right now. I'm going to share with you some facts, you know, because obviously you can hear about supports that are weak. So for instance, some people who say employers prefer younger applicants, they would support it by saying employers feel younger is better because those who are younger have more energy, they have better focus. Employers just prefer younger applicants is what they would say. But wouldn't that prove that preference exists? And what I mean by that is this. Some employers prefer younger applicants, but doesn't that prove that if some employers prefer younger applicants, there are those that prefer older applicants? In fact, that's true. If you go online and research studies on this, the most recent one was published in Forbes magazine. A study by Manpower shows over 1,000 employers from different industries were asked the following question. Do you prefer older or younger applicants? And this was an anonymous survey. Didn't mention the names of the employers, right? 69% said they prefer older applicants. And the reason was they believed older applicants are more dependable, more professional, know the job better, less costly. And they're more apt to help other people within the organization come together than younger applicants are. So we know that research shows the opposite of this claim is true, that employers feel younger applicants have more energy or better focus. Another one is, it is less costly to hire younger applicants. We know that's not true. So always ask for supported facts. I'm going to share with you some facts about that claim, about the age claim. It does not pay to discriminate. That's the first one. You see, the Age Discrimination Act of 1967 and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 makes it very costly for any employer to choose over older versus younger. And over the years, companies have learned, I mean, I'm not saying discrimination doesn't exist. A lot of companies over the years have discriminated for age, and they've, fired someone who was older or didn't hire someone who was old, and they've paid over the years. Black Angus is an example. Black Angus paid $260,000 to a cook whom they let go because he was old. And companies have paid so much money over the years since the Act of 1967 that they have come to realize it's not worth discriminating. In fact, today they recognize that when you don't discriminate, you create diversity, right? And it's more profitable to hire based on diversity. This is because, this is one research, by 2050, it's estimated that the U.S. population will grow to 439 million. Two-thirds of that increase will be the result of new immigration, with the population expected to become much older, with nearly 1 in 5 U.S. residents age 65 or older. Now, a diverse staff can better respond to an increasingly diverse customer base in local markets. Companies realize that today. Consumers identify with companies that reflect themselves and their values in society. And companies know that today, and this is evident when observing company websites. If you go to various websites, like go to the Coca-Cola company website, they talk about global diversity as their mission, mirroring rich diversity of the marketplace. AT&T writes, "It's our diverse, inclusive culture that welcomes all points of view." Mattel writes, "We will hire, retain, and promote a diverse workforce." And this is true across the board with every company. In fact, one can randomly search any company and find their culture diversity. The consciousness is true in the public sector as well. An analysis of the trends within the federal government hiring writes the following: over the past several decades, increased diversity in the workforces of organizations has been highlighted as one of the most noticeable work-related trends. So who's more qualified for this job? Remember, there is no truth, just a better argument supported by evidence. Next time you go to an interview, remember that that hiring manager is not looking at your age. They're looking at your skills. They're looking at your viability. They're not looking at your way of speaking English. They're not looking at your accent. They're not looking at your height. They're not looking at your ethnicity. They're looking at your viability. Now, am I saying that discrimination doesn't exist? No, I'm sure it does. I'm sure there are people out there that prefer someone who is a particular way over another. But that only proves preference. There's nothing wrong with having preference. Like, I like to work with someone who looks like myself. That's my preference. Is there anything wrong with that? Well, you know, that could qualify maybe for discrimination, but you know, who cares? Who cares about this employer? There's plenty of other employers where that one came from. As long as you focus on communicating your skills in a concise, clear fashion and argue your point that you can become an asset to that organization, if they don't recognize that, if they don't recognize that you're going to be an asset to their become an asset to their organization as soon as they hire you, maybe that's not the company that you want to interview with or work for. There is plenty of other companies where that one came from. So instead of blaming, you know, some exterior factor for why you're not employed, I'm not saying you're doing that, I'm saying some do. Instead of blaming that exterior circumstance, focus on enhancing your ability to communicate your message. Communicate your message succinctly, clearly, with precision. Those of you that said earlier you like the more concise response, you are correct. Having a precise response is important. You know, obviously telling a story is equally as important to create the emotions for the listener. We all like stories, right? And so this is the last point I wanted to cover with you for today, is that work on presenting your arguments. And your resume is the guide. We are putting together that content so that we have a guide that we're going to use when we speak to an employer on a phone interview or when we talk to them in person in a face-to-face interview. That's why it's so important to be concise and succinct on your resume with the content. It's important to know what's on there because that's what you're going to be talking about. Whatever's on your resume is what you're going to be talking about at an interview. You're going to be arguing your point. Your evidence is in your resume. Your premises are in the resume. And obviously your conclusion is not in the resume, but your resume supports it. Your conclusion is, you should hire me. I'm the best applicant for this job. And the content of your resume supports that conclusion. Very good. So I'm done with today's presentation. Today we wanted to talk about the resume, the 13 steps to the phone interview. You can read more about the 13 preparation steps of the phone interview in the guide 3. You should have all received it, and learn the 4 points that leads to an interview. Next week, we're going to talk about face-to-face interviews, social media, and how to apply for a job so that you're not wasting your time applying to jobs that don't really exist. Any questions? I'm going to stay on the line for the next few minutes to answer any questions you may have. Feel free to type your questions. Please prepare your resume this week. Don't show me your old resume next week. Show me a resume you've transitioned so that I can help you create your resumes and start applying for jobs by the time we're done next week. Ferdinand asks, what is the difference between a base resume and online job application? Does a base resume use only a guide to create a specific resume based on the available position? Does an employer use the online job application requirements in addition to a resume to identify a match? That's a good question. Ferdinand, next week we're going to talk about the online application. The resume is a document that argues your points, either in person or in the way you communicate on the phone. The online application is how you apply for a job, right? So when you create your skill doc, when you create your resume, you're really constructing how you will argue your point. Your conclusion is, you should hire me, and your resume is the evidence why they should hire you. Then you can apply for a job and online using an online application, and we're going to talk about that next week in greater detail. Shelley writes, I did not receive the guide. Can you please send it? Shelley, if you could please email me directly. I'm going to send my email address right now to everyone. And if you didn't receive any of the guides, then please email me so that I can make sure it goes out. Okay. Amy writes, so tomorrow I have a face-to-face. Should I work on my new resume today to bring with me tomorrow, or should I bring a copy of the one I sent a month ago before we started this class? You know, that's up to you, Amy. When you go to an interview, you want to have a document that outlines your arguments. And whichever resume best does that, that's the one you take. Now, let's say you create a new resume, you take it with you tomorrow, and they say, hey, wait a second. We've got this resume that says this. We've got this resume that says that. You tell them, right, I have two resumes with your company now because on my first resume, I did not best communicate my relevancy to this particular position. I've done a lot of things during my career, but I decided before this interview that I organize only those skills that I have that pertains to this particular position so that you can make an informed decision about my candidacy by only looking at those skills that pertains to this position. That's why I have this other resume, because this resume best communicates my candidacy and argues my point as to why I'm the best person for this position. Anne asks, due to schedule change to account for Labor Day, I will miss the next class. I will be in the process of moving. I will make class 6 in session 6 in class 10. Not a problem, Anne. We look forward to seeing you there. Ty asks, why and how why and how should we create a cover letter? Yet the cover letter is a document that should entice the employer to look at your resume. And if the cover letter does not do that, if it does not entice the hiring manager to look at your resume, instead, if it satisfies their curiosity and they determine not to look at your resume after reading it, then you shouldn't write a cover letter. You should only send a cover letter if it guarantees that they will look at your resume. Because your resume is an important document. It is the one that argues your points, not the cover letter. If the cover letter was to argue your points, it would then be the resume, right? So the cover letter should be 2 or 3 lines, if they really require that you send them one, and it should direct their focus towards the resume. Let's see here. I hope that answers your question, Ty. Paristu asks, have you already sent today's guide? Yes, Paristu. We sent guide 1, 2, 3, and 4 last week. If you haven't received the guides, please email me, Paristu. Mel asks, he may not attend next week. That's fine. You can always make them up. You can make them up online, Mel. So let me show you quickly. This may be helpful to others on the call as well, how you can make up your classes. So if you go to anycouncil.org and go to Get Back to Work Now training, here you can see class 9, 10, and 11. You click on any of these. Let's say class 10. You can scroll down, Mel, and take a look at the dates and determine which class you need to make up and then register for that class. Shelley writes, this is regarding my resume. Should I leave out the months on the resume and just include the years? Because right now I have the months and years on my resume. Yeah, the months really are not relevant. The years are. And then when you include the years, make sure you demonstrate track record. If you want me to look at this for you next week, I'll be happy to. Mary writes, if I put my experience on the resume by the time, say, 2 years, and not actual dates, should all the job skills on the resume be in that format? Time doing those skills and not the actual dates. I want to apply for advertising jobs and possibly translating publishing jobs. So on my resume, I need to put the time I've spent on skills that transfer to those jobs. Since I haven't actually worked at jobs with that title before, I've mainly done teaching, but I'm trying to transition to the position now. Yeah, absolutely, Mary. So why don't you put it together and send it to me before the class next week, and I'll look at it for you, okay? I'll look at it, and everyone can benefit from what we do with your track record. So I'll be happy to look at it for you next week. Yeah, it's difficult for me to answer this question, Mary, unless I have your resume in front of me and I can take a look at some of those titles, some of those dates, and then we can organize it together. Helen asks, what is the link for the previous workshop? There's no link for the previous workshop, Helen. Once the workshop is done, it's done. And we are working on creating a software right now. They're developing it for us so that graduates of the classes can go in, can log in, and have access to video recordings of sessions. But that's not there yet. So once you miss a session, you've missed it. You can always make it up in the future. Ty asks, how many pages should I have for a resume? I've told 2 pages is best. You know, Ty, talent management softwares, you know, the computerized programs that read content for a resume don't really count pages. They look at content. So when you're sending your resume online, it doesn't really matter how many pages your resume has. What matters is how relevant is your resume to that job. So if your argument that you are relevant to that position takes 4 pages to demonstrate, then your resume is going to be 4 pages. If your argument takes only half a page, then your resume is going to be half a page, right? So it really doesn't matter. Page no longer is relevant. Content is. Any other questions? Very good. I want to thank all of you for your participation. Great job, everybody. I look forward to looking at your resumes next week. Remember, again, if you have questions with your resume, then what you do is send me your resume before the class, and I'll look at it for you. Helen asks, can you discuss more about membership? Sure, I'll be happy to. To become a member, you simply go to our website, Helen, go to donate, and you donate to Projects Hope and Hero to Hire right down here. You become a member here, and you complete this application here, and you become a member. It's an annual membership. You get access to online sessions where we help you with the content of your resume. So you and I will be online with a group of people who are members, who are your peers, right? So 3 of you, for instance, would be on an online session, and I help type the content of your resume as others watch. And then you get access to all of our events, free access. You get a membership card. You just show it at the door, and you get free access to all of our events. So that's what a membership is, and it's a yearly membership. I hope I answered your questions, Helen. Troy asks, I'm looking forward to next week. You got it, Troy. We look forward to seeing you there, too. Take care, everybody. Have a great day, and I look forward to talking to all of you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.